This is Barry from Imagination to Reality CNC, and in this video I want to get through what are soft limits and what are hard limits. And these are two things that pop up on your screen and sometimes do cause confusion. So as always, when operating our i2R CNC machine, we should always run a hole mold cycle. And when we complete the hole mold cycle, the machine always moves up towards the sky, clearing the table on the Z-axis, towards the left-hand side of the machine in an X negative direction, and towards the front of the machine in a Y negative direction. When the hole mold cycle is complete, it basically allows the CNC machine and the software to be aligned. And this is what forms the software limits. The software limits are an imaginary boundary on which the software will not allow the physical machine to travel outside of. When a software limit is active, the machine will come to a soft stop without crashing into any extremity of the machine, and a pop-up will appear on the UCCNC screen suggesting that a software limit has been active. Please note that this message is normal when you travel to the extremities of the machine where those software limits exist. If those soft limits are happening on an unusual spot, it may suggest that the machine has somehow lost position or you haven't completed a successful hole mold cycle. If that is the case, I just recommend redoing the hole mold cycle again. Another situation that users do find they get themselves in is activating a hard limit. And when a hardware limit is active, it's very similar to holding a reset button and the machine will not move in any direction. And this can be quite frustrating because you do wonder, how do I get myself out of the situation and get off that physical hard limit? So I'm going to get myself into a situation now where a hardware limit is active, and I'm going to show you how to identify it and how to overcome it and get back into safe operation. So right now I've moved the X in a negative direction and I've surpassed that software limit, and basically I've activated the X limit switch or the X hard limit. The best way to figure this out and determine what you have actually done is by using the Diagnostics tab on the UCCNC screen. Please note that the Diagnostics tab comes in three main sections. The I/O monitor, which is really only for when you're speaking with technical support, and it's not something you need to worry about. But the I/O function monitor is the center column on the diagnostic screen set, and this is everything translated into English terms that should help you understand any problem you may have with the machine. In our case, we can see that the X limit negative is active and the X home position. The reason this is useful is it shows us that we'll need to move the X axis in a positive direction to disengage that limit. So to do this, we'll jump back to the Run tab, and I just want to show you that when a hard limit is active, you are unable to undo the reset button. When I try to disengage the reset, a message will keep popping up on the screen because that hardware limit is active. As the message suggests, we do recommend going to the Diagnostics tab to determine which hardware limit is active. And this in turn then suggests which way to move the machine to get off that limit. Remember, we cannot move the machine if the reset is active, so the only way to get ourselves out of this situation is to override the physical hard limits. And the override limits command can be found towards the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And please note that the override limits does only work for physical hardware limits. If you've activated a software limit, you only need to acknowledge the message and move in an opposite direction. So for us, we have the X limit activated. I'm now able to click the override limits key. If the override limits key does start flashing at you with the red line underneath override limits, this indicates to me that the limit is actually currently active. And it's a reminder to you to be careful right now that the software is ignoring all limit commands. And if we move in the wrong direction towards the X negative, we are going to crash the machine even further. We have the override limits blinking at us on the screen, and at this stage the reset's also still blinking. We need to make the reset solid so that the machine is in a state that's able to move. And please note the override limits is still flashing because that physical limit is still triggered. And the best and only way of getting out of this scenario is then completing a hole mold cycle again. The hole mold cycle will get off the physical limit that is active, and it will home all axis of the machine, enabling the soft limits again that will hopefully be in the right position and will stop you getting into this situation in the first place. That concludes the video on soft limits and hard limits, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of insights on the difference between them, what to do when they appear on the screen, and in the case of the hardware limit, how to get yourself out of that situation using the software alone.